The first time someone truly saw him, it wasn't with kindness, it was with the sharp, cautious gaze of a soldier trained to notice what others missed. And in that moment, all the secrets he'd buried for 50 years began clawing their way back to the surface like echoes refusing to die. No one at the Hastings Veterans Center expected anything unusual that morning. The place smelled faintly of overcooked cabbage and bleach. The same flickering light in the hallway buzzed overhead. It was the kind of place where time didn't pass, it settled like dust. Harold Boone looked like a man time had forgotten. His hands were large and gnarled, the kind that once built things. His back had started to curve in on itself, and his gray wool cap was tugged low over his brow. He sat alone in the corner of the dining hall, as he always did, hugging a chipped mug of black coffee like it held the last of his warmth. But Harold wasn't always an old man. Decades ago, he was a skilled cabinet maker, known for building furniture with joints so precise they never creaked. He worked in a shop in Essex, left behind a young wife named Martha when he got drafted. She was pregnant when he left. He told her he'd be back before the baby could talk. But life had other plans. The baby grew up without ever hearing his voice. Martha never remarried, and Harold never came back. At least not as the man who left. He preferred his quiet spot in the corner. Most folks barely noticed him. Staff offered polite nods. Volunteers brought trays of shepherd's pie and watery pudding. But no one really saw him, and Harold had learned not to mind. The world had moved on. He let it, until the stranger appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, neatly trimmed beard. White t-shirt stretched across his chest. His posture didn't ask for respect, it demanded it. You could tell from the way he moved, alert, calculating, quiet. Still military. His name was Daniel Mercer, a Navy recon specialist on active leave from deployment. He'd come to drop off donation kits, socks, razors, canned goods, and get a few signatures for a charity newsletter, in and out. 10 minutes. Max. But as he walked by the cafeteria doors, something stopped him cold. He glanced sideways, and then he saw it. A tattoo. Faded, just barely visible beneath the rolled sleeve of Harold's green flannel shirt. The ink had bled into his skin over time, but the image was still clear. A hawk, mid-dive, talons extended. Wings bent in attack, wrapped in barbed wire. Daniel's breath hitched. He hadn't seen that symbol since he was a teenager, kneeling beside his grandfather's toolbox in a garage in Sheffield. His grandfather, Marcus Mercer, wore the same mark. The old man had joked it stung more than a bullet wound. Only a few got this, Marcus once said, tapping his arm. We were the Phantom Watch, missions no one admitted happened. Places no one wanted to be. That tattoo had haunted Daniel ever since. And now here it was, again, on the arm of a stranger. Could it be him? Daniel stepped into the dining hall, heart hammering. The world didn't notice. Just an old man drinking cold coffee. But for Daniel, the room suddenly felt tilted. He moved closer, footsteps slow and steady. Harold didn't look up. He was lost in the steam rising from his mug. The same way he was lost in every morning. Daniel took a breath. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. Harold's eyes lifted, pale blue, tired but sharp. He didn't smile. Just gave a nod. Daniel pointed to the tattoo. "That hawk. Is it from Phantom Watch Unit?" Everything stopped. Harold's hand froze midair. He lowered the mug slowly. His eyes narrowed. The name hadn't been spoken in half a century. "Where'd you hear that?" he asked. Daniel sat down across from him. "My grandfather, Marcus Mercer." Sighed. Someone dragged him out of a burning hut in 1970. He wore that same tattoo. Harold stared. No movement, no blink. But something shifted inside. "Marcus, that was your grandfather?" Daniel nodded. Harold exhaled, a long breath, like letting go of something he'd held for decades. Thought he died that day, Harold said. He hadn't told this story before. Not like this. Harold didn't speak of the war. Not because he forgot, but because he remembered too much. The sounds, the smoke, the blood. They lived under his skin. And that tattoo, it was more than ink. It was a scar. But Daniel wasn't just anyone. He was family. And Marcus wasn't. Just another soldier. Harold leaned back, fingers brushing the tattoo gently. He almost stayed silent. But then he began. The first thing I remember, the smell, damp leaves, diesel fuel, gunpowder. That jungle wasn't a forest. It was a trap that breathed. People speak of Vietnam. But the truth, the worst of it happened where maps ended. Daniel leaned in. We were 6. Dropped near the edge of Fenwick Hills. Phantom watch. No uniforms. No paperwork. Sent to confirm. Intel on weapons stockpiles. No exfil plan. No support. His voice was flat, honest. Not a performance. A confession. We got ambushed, just past the ridge. One of ours, Sam Carter, tripped a mine. Sounded like the whole world exploded. Marcus got thrown inside a hut. Hit his head on the threshold. Harold paused. By the time I reached him, the hut was flames. Couldn't hear anything but ringing. Thought I was dead. Then I saw it. His fingers sticking out from under a beam. Daniel swallowed. You saved him. I tried. Roof was coming down. Fire on. All sides, my sleeve caught. But I got him out. Carried him on my back. Ran blind through the bush. Dropped by a riverbank. We lay in the mud for hours. Then what? Waited till dark. Moved with the moon. 3 nights, no food. He was half conscious, but alive. Found a patrol. Radioed for help. Daniel nodded slowly. He came home, married, had my dad. And me. Harold looked down, then gave a small smile. That's good. I never knew. Daniel leaned forward. He talked about you. Never your name. Just said if he saw that hawk again, he'd know. Harold chuckled quietly. That old bird. Didn't think it'd mean anything to anyone. They sat for a while. Then Daniel asked, why didn't you ever tell anyone about the mission? Harold's eyes darkened. Who would have believed me? A black soldier talking about a war the government buried? About a unit they swore didn't exist? We came home to silence, son, and sometimes worse. We learned to keep our stories to ourselves. Daniel clenched his fists. That's wrong. It was real, Harold said. Just not official. Daniel was trained not to show emotion. But this broke through. Did you ever try to find him again? Harold shook his head. Didn't know if he lived. Men like us ... We disappear. But you didn't, Daniel said. You saved him. Harold didn't glow. He looked tired, worn. I did what I hoped someone would do for me. Daniel asked gently, where do you live now? A small flat in Dover, 1 bedroom. My truck's older than you, but she still runs if I talk nice. Married? Once. She left. Wanted peace. I was full of noise. Children? Harold paused. None that I know of. Daniel glanced again at the hawk. Why that symbol? Harold answered slowly. Because we had to remember ourselves. No records. No medals, just this. If we forgot, the world would too. And the wire? Means we got out, but not untouched. Daniel sat up straighter. This story, it matters. People should hear it. Harold raised an eyebrow. Tried once. 1973. Told someone at the defense office. He nodded. Wrote nothing. Weeks later, a letter came. No record of service. That was the end of that. Daniel gritted his teeth. That's what it was, Harold said. They were erased, not forgotten, but scrubbed from paper. Left in memory alone. Daniel whispered, maybe I was meant to meet you, not just to say thank you, but to carry this. Harold studied him, a long moment. then smiled. "You've got your grandfather's fire. Then I'll use it," Daniel said. And in the space between them, the silence lifted just a little. Harold hadn't finished his story. Not yet. Harold didn't answer right away. He drew in a slow breath through his nose and gazed into the rising steam of his coffee, as if trying to read something long buried, something only he could see. His voice dropped, quiet, almost hesitant. "There's more to what happened that night," he said. "More than I ever told anyone. Not even your grandfather." Daniel didn't speak. He simply leaned forward, listening. It was July, rain season, heavy, hot. We were 8 clicks off the main trail, maybe 2 miles south of the valley line. The grass was waist-high and slick with rain. The hills were steep and soaked in heat so thick it felt like you were chewing the air. Harold's fingers flexed slightly, curling as if they still remembered the weight of the rifle he once carried. We'd been inserted 6 days earlier. Supplies were running thin. We were worn down. There were 6 of us: me, Senator Blake, Johnny Morales, Nova Price, Carter Finman, and your grandfather. Marcus was the radio man, but he could shoot better than any of us. Bennett led the team. No nonsense, all focus. We were scraped up, bruised, but we were still alert. His voice changed, then not in tone, but in depth. He wasn't talking to Daniel anymore. He was reliving the moment. "We found it. 2 trucks hidden under tarps covered with leaves. Crates of ammo stacked higher than a man. And a small village. Around it maybe 20 people, mostly women, a few kids. Some young men. We were told not to engage. Just watch, record, report." He paused. "But someone saw us. Because less than an hour later, they came." "Who?" Daniel asked. Harold's jaw tensed. "Locals, militants, mix of trained fighters and irregulars. They had dogs. Good ones. Picked up our trail like it was painted on the trees. We were surrounded by sundown. Nova went down first neck shot. We pulled him into a hut. Tried to stop the bleeding. Bennett ordered us to hold until extraction. Harold's hands curled tighter around the mug. But we never got through. Something was jamming the signal. Marcus tried again and again. Blood on his hands, fingers slipping. Then, he clenched his eyes shut for a second. Boom! Grenade hit the side of the hut, took out the wall. Flames shot up, everything lit. The air turned black. He opened his eyes, sharper now, harder. I remember grabbing Marcus. He was unconscious, leg twisted. Still gripping that damn radio. Morales yelled something. I couldn't hear it. My ears were ringing. Then the roof started to cave. Harold inhaled, deeper now. I should have left him. That's what they teach you. Save yourself. But something in me just couldn't. I dug through the wall, found him by the vest, and dragged him out. After that blur, screaming, fire, bullets, I ran. No idea how I didn't get hit. Just kept moving. He looked at Daniel. I didn't even know if he was alive, not until hours later. Daniel's throat tightened. You saved him. That's all that matters. Maybe, Harold said with a weak smile. But the part one never said. The rest of our team. They didn't make it. I thought Bennett was behind me. Thought Finn was too. But the ravine, we were the only ones who made it down. What happened next? I waited. 3 days, we stayed hidden. Every hour, I thought someone would find us. But no one did. Daniel asked, did you ever get closure? Harold shook his head. Closure's something they put in movies to make people feel better. In real life, you survive. You carry. You learn to walk with ghosts. Daniel sat in silence, every word sinking deep like a stone dropped into still water. Harold leaned closer. There's a box in my flat. A file. Has a map. A few dog tags. One of Finn's letters he never mailed. It's just been sitting there. I never knew what to do with it. Maybe someone else should hold it now. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'll take care of it, I promise. Harold stared at him, then nodded slowly. Then maybe all that running wasn't for nothing. But Daniel could feel that this story wasn't just about war. It had been buried. For a reason. Harold leaned back. His shoulders slumped, like the words had drained more from him than any firefight ever could. I came back stateside in August of 1970, he said quietly. Flew into Langley, no cheers. Just boo heels on pavement and a sergeant barking orders. He traced the rim of his mug with his slow finger. I walked out of the airport in uniform, thought I'd feel proud. Instead, got spit on. Called a traitor. I was 22, shrapnel in my leg. And they told me to forget everything. Forget the team. Forget the scars. Daniel looked down. He'd heard stories like this before, but not like this. Not from 2 feet away. You tried to report it? I did. Took everything I had to the VA in Baltimore. Showed them the field map. The tags, dates, names, the whole thing. Guy looked at me and said my file was redacted. Said the mission didn't exist. Told me I must have gotten confused. Harold let out a dry laugh. I wasn't confused. I was erased. The air seemed heavier after he said it. They called us ghosts for a reason, he added. When stuff went wrong, they didn't fix it. They burned the trail. Daniel's voice was tight. They just left you? Harold shrugged. Some of us ended up in jail. Others vanished. I tried to get on at the post office. Got denied, twice. Background check said no. Never explained why. My military ID might as well have been a scrap of paper. Daniel's voice dropped. Because you were black? Harold was quiet. Part of it. The rest? They didn't want questions. We saw things we weren't meant to. Survived things we weren't supposed to walk away from. So what did you do? Odd jobs, freight hauling, construction, anything that paid cash. Slept in my truck a few times. Kept my head down. Tried again in '85. Went to the VA in Dover. Told the same story. Guy looked at me and said, never heard of Phantom Watch. Same exact phrase. You're mistaken, sir. Daniel muttered. That's unbelievable. Harold looked him dead in the eye. It's not unbelievable. It's America. Daniel leaned back. Let that settle. You ever think of writing a book? Harold smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I couldn't afford the paper, and who'd read it? Some forgotten relic trying to prove he mattered. I would, Daniel said. Harold's smile lingered this time. Maybe now, but back then? When the world stops calling your name, you stop saying it. They sat for a long moment. The clatter of forks and distant laughter returned. Daniel asked, do you miss them, your team? Harold's eyes clouded over. Every damn day. They were my brothers, even when we fought, even in silence. I still hear Morales's laugh, Nova's smart mouth, and Bennett. Bennett had this look like he saw something just over the horizon. Something we couldn't. He paused. I think about them more now than I did back then. Why now? Because I got old. And they didn't. They stayed 22. Frozen in time. Daniel swallowed hard. He couldn't let those memories vanish. You know, Daniel said, voice steady, I've done 2 deployments, Afghanistan and Syria. I've seen death. I've buried friends. But I've never been erased. Harold raised his eyebrows. That's the difference 50 years makes, huh? I guess, Daniel said. But sometimes I wonder if we just traded one kind of war for another. Harold tilted his head. How do you mean? You fought overseas and came home to a country that wouldn't claim you. I fight overseas and come home to a country that only wants the legend, not the truth. People love us when we're in uniform, but once it's off, they stop listening. Harold looked genuinely surprised. Didn't expect that from someone your age. I didn't either, Daniel said. Not until I saw how fast people forget. My buddy. Harold looked at Daniel, his expression unreadable. The edges of his mouth didn't move, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something recognition, perhaps. My buddy Zane lost both his legs 2 weeks after we got back. Daniel said, his voice tighter than before. Roadside ID. He filed for disability, got denied. They told him it didn't count because the mission was classified. Harold's face stayed still, but something shifted behind his eyes. Sound familiar? Harold gave a slow nod. Daniel leaned back. That's the part that kills me, he said. It's like they squeeze everything they can out of the story, then throw away the people who lived it. Harold let out a long breath, shoulders dropping just slightly. You think it'll change? He asked. Daniel paused, honest. I don't know. But I do know this. If we stop talking, it never will. Harold nodded, slow and thoughtful. You know what's strange? He said. I spent decades thinking no one gave a damn. And now here you are, sitting across from me, knowing more about that night than anyone's ever asked in 50 years. Daniel's voice softened. I grew up with your story. My grandfather, he talked about you like a ghost that saved his life. Like some figure out of a legend. And then today, I walk into this place and see a man drinking cold coffee alone. And I realized ghosts get old too. For the first time, Harold smiled, not a polite smile. A real one. I'm not a hero, he said. I panicked that night. I didn't think, I just moved. Daniel shook his head. That's exactly what makes it heroic. You didn't do it to be remembered. You just did it. Harold looked down into his mug, the smile fading slowly. And yet, here I am, still wondering if it mattered. Daniel's voice was firm now. It did. You saved a man who went home, who built a life, raised a kid, who gave me a name. You mattered more than you'll ever know. Harold studied him, quiet. Then he exhaled long and deep as if letting go of something he'd been holding far too long. You know what I remember most from that night? He asked. Daniel leaned in. What? Right after we crossed the ravine I was lying in. The mud with your grandfather half-conscious next to me. He opened one eye and whispered, Tell me I'm not dead. And I said, if we're both dead, this is one hell of an afterlife. Daniel laughed, the sound catching in his throat. Sounds like him. I didn't know what to do with that memory, Harold said. So I just kept it. They sat in silence. It wasn't empty, it was full of memory, of weight. Of truth passed quietly from one soul to another. So, Harold asked finally, what now? Daniel was quiet, thinking. Now we figure out how to make this right, however we can. Harold gave a small smirk, shaking his head. You sure? Because once you start digging, things come up that people don't want found. Daniel didn't flinch. Then they should have buried them better. Harold's smile didn't grow, but his eyes shone with something sharp, something proud. When Daniel visited Harold next, he didn't come for coffee. He came with a thick manila folder, documents, photos, classified. Records. Some stamped in red, some blurred from age. Some that probably weren't supposed to leave storage. He laid it on the table like he was setting down a live wire. I did some digging, Daniel said. Made calls. Reached out to a retired colonel I trained under. Took a while, but I found it. Harold didn't touch the folder, just looked at it. What is it? Proof, Daniel said. Your unit Phantom watch. They said it never existed. But I found a reference buried in a sealed file tied to something called Operation Striker Watch. Coordinates match your map. Even found a grainy recon photo, 6 figures moving through jungle. No names, but 6. Harold leaned back, narrowed his eyes. They buried it deep, almost too deep, Daniel said. He opened the folder. Inside, black and white images. Old mission memos, redacted transmissions. But one photo made Harold freeze. Aerial shot. Date marked July 12, 1970. Blurry, but visible. A clearing. A hut on fire, and two small figures crawling toward the trees. Harold stared at it for a long time. "I know that tree," he said. Daniel waited. "There's a bend and the trunk leans. Like it's trying to run. I remember that." Then Harold looked up. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because if my grandfather were still alive, I'd want someone to do it for him." Harold gave a tired smile. "You got his heart." Daniel went on. "I submitted a recommendation for a medal. Post-service citation. It's a start, but it's in the record now." The smile faded. "I don't want a medal," Harold said. Daniel blinked. "Why not?" "I spent too long thinking. I didn't exist. A ribbon won't change that. It won't bring my team back, won't erase the nights I wondered if I imagined it all. But it might make the next guy think twice before ignoring someone like you," Daniel said. Harold was silent. "And it's not about the medal," Daniel added. "It's about putting your name where it belongs. Not in a forgotten drawer. In history." Harold looked at the folder again. "You're serious?" "I'm not letting it disappear." Harold thought long, then nodded. "If you're gonna do this, don't do it for me. Do it for Bennett. For Nova. For Finn. They didn't come back. I just got lucky." "I'm doing it for all of you," Daniel said. "But mostly for you. Because no one should have had to carry all this alone." Harold gave a small, tired nod. "You've got fire, son." "That's rare." "So I've been told," Daniel said, cracking a grin. For a moment, the room lightened. Like something old had finally found a place to rest. Harold reached out, pulled the folder toward him. "Let's see what truth looks like on paper." Outside, cars rolled past Hastings Road, unnoticed. The world kept turning, but inside that room, something had shifted. Maybe not for everyone, but for one man who had waited a lifetime to be seen. Neither of them realized it yet, but the truth they'd stirred up was already starting to wake the people who had tried so hard to keep it buried. When Daniel walked into the center again a week later, he wasn't alone. When Daniel walked into the center again a week later, something felt different. This time he wasn't alone. Behind him followed two men from the Naval Historical Center in Washington, a woman from the Pentagon's POW MIA accounting agency, and Maya Dawson, an independent journalist who had quietly spent the last 12 years investigating forgotten missions from the Vietnam era. Word had spread, not widely, but intentionally. Daniel had made sure it only reached those with a reason to care. Harold was at his usual table, coffee in hand, cap low. He noticed Daniel immediately, then his eyes moved to the strangers trailing behind. His brow furrowed. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Daniel didn't smile. He just pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "They're here for your story," he said quietly, "and they're not here to bury it." Harold's fingers tensed around his mug. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," Daniel replied calmly. "But the world needs to hear it anyway." Maya stepped forward and gently placed a small recorder on the table. "Mr. Boone," she said, soft but clear, "would you let me listen?" Harold looked at her a long moment. Then, slowly, he set his coffee down. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. And somehow the room changed. The usual noise trays clattering, voices bickering over cards, TV's humming dimmed. Not because anyone told it to, but because something real was happening. Daniel stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes locked on Harold. Then Harold began to speak. He told them everything. No theatrics, no flourishes. Just the weight of truth spoken plain. He described the mud, the smoke, the suffocating heat. He named every man: Bennett, Morales, Nova, Finn. He described the ambush, the fire, Earl's unconscious body over his shoulder, the 3 days lost in the jungle. And then, the silence that followed, the erasure. The letter that told him he didn't exist. No one interrupted. Maya wiped at her eyes once. The Pentagon woman scribbled in a notebook, jaw tight. The men from the historical center exchanged glances but said nothing. When Harold finished, no one clapped. Until Daniel stepped forward and placed a small wooden box on the table. It was simple, clean. Inside, an engraved plaque and a service ribbon. A citation tucked neatly behind. Unofficial, Daniel said, but real. Harold looked at the box as if it didn't belong to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Recognition," Daniel replied. "Not from Congress, not from the VA, from the people who heard you and believe you." Harold ran a finger across the brass plate. It read, "Sergeant Harold Boone, Phantom Watch." "Someone's gonna raise hell over this," he murmured. "Let them," Daniel said. They had 50 years to speak. "It's your turn now." The people in the room clapped, not loud. Not long, but enough. Enough to mean something. And for a second, just one, Harold leaned back and closed his eyes. He didn't feel honored. He didn't feel celebrated. He felt seen. Later that day, as people began to pack up, Maya leaned in close. "We're doing a full article," she said. "Front page of the Historical Review. Your team is getting a proper place in the record." Harold nodded, quiet. But as Daniel turned to leave, Harold stopped him. "Hey," Daniel turned. "You were right," Harold said. "Sometimes truth matters more than silence." Daniel gave a half smile. "You gonna be okay?" Harold shrugged. "Guess I'll find out." But Daniel knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a truth finally given air. Harold didn't vanish back into the background after that day. He still sat at the same table, wore the same cap, drank the same coffee. But something had changed. People stopped by, not to pity him, not to thank him, just to sit, to listen. One young volunteer, Jared, maybe 24, started bringing a tape recorder. Said he wanted to record first-hand stories, Harold would say. Some days he talked about Laos. Other days about the stubborn Buick that wouldn't start. Either way, people listened. For the first time in years, Harold felt real. Not a name. Not a ghost. Real. The article Maya published spread far beyond expectations. It ran in the National, Veterans Historical Review, then 2 Virginia papers. Within weeks, a petition emerged online calling for a posthumous unit citation for Phantom Watch. Daniel shared it with his SEAL network. It spread fast. More surprising? 2 retired colonels and a former CIA analyst signed it. Harold read the names out loud. "Would you look at that?" he chuckled. Some ghosts still carry pens. Then came the letters. Families of lost soldiers. Grandchildren of veterans who'd never spoken of Laos. Strangers who read the article and felt a quiet ache they couldn't name. One envelope came from Montana. Inside, a photo of a man beside a rusted barn, arm around a little girl. On the back, Finn's brother. "He talked about you once." Harold didn't cry, but he carried that photo in his front pocket for a week. Daniel kept visiting, not just to talk, to plan. He had ideas: a memorial, a plaque, names carved where they should have been all along. But Harold hesitated. "We were meant to disappear," he said one afternoon. Daniel just smiled. "And look how that turned out." Harold laughed. One day, Daniel asked, "What would your teammates say if they saw all this now?" Harold didn't miss a beat. "They'd give me hell for talking so much," he said. Then, more softly, "But I think they'd be glad someone remembered." The falcon tattoo on his arm had faded, the ink a soft blue-gray. Daniel brought in a tattoo artist, a vet himself. With Harold's nod, the man carefully retouched the wings, sharpened the claws, matched the barbed wire exactly to the sketch Harold had folded in his wallet. When it was done, Harold looked at it in the mirror. "Looks like it's ready to fly again," he said. "You never stopped," Daniel replied. A month later, Harold spoke at a middle school in Chesapeake. The students had never heard of Laos. One girl asked if it was like a superhero mission. Harold smiled. "No," he said. "Superheroes get parades. We just made sure each other got home." 3 teachers hugged him after. That night Daniel called. "You know," Harold said, "if your grandfather were here, I think he'd be proud of how you carried the story." "I'm just following his map," Daniel said. Harold didn't answer right away. Then, warmly, "You turned a ghost into a man again." It was the last time Daniel ever heard his voice sound that light. 2 weeks later, Harold Boone passed in his sleep, peacefully, no hospital. Just his old Buick parked outside and a jazz station playing low. The tattoo on his arm was still sharp. Daniel arranged the memorial himself, no drama, no speeches. Just a plaque under the tree where Harold liked to sit. It read, "Sergeant Harold Boone. He carried those who couldn't and remembered those no." One would next to it, "Small but forever. A falcon, diving through wire." Let this be your reminder. The stories that shape us often live in the quietest people. All they need is someone to ask, someone to care. Even the quietest souls carry the loudest truths. Sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to ask and another brave enough to answer, to bring a forgotten story back to life. If this story touched your heart, give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Because when we listen, we don't just remember the past, we give it a voice.